here today. Lots of new faces in this room to me. Kathy and Carla may know many of you. Welcome to the live studio audience recording of Looking Up, a podcast for Christian women with your hosts, Carla Moore and Kathy Pollard. I had to practice that because I just knew I was going to say Kathy Moore. So we thank you for being here. We are going to, in order to give them more time, because we want to hear their chit chat, I'm going to do less. They need no introduction. All of us in here probably know as much about them as we do our own best friend. Because that's what they feel like, our little besties. So we thank you for being here. We thank you all for being here and doing this. We're lucky that we get to be here and be a part of it. And I'm going to let you all get started.
All right, good afternoon. Is this on or am I supposed to do something first? Can everybody hear me okay? Okay, good. We're so glad that we can record this episode with everybody here. Thank you for being here. Welcome to Equipped. This is Looking Up, a podcast for Christian women. I'm Kathy Pollard, one of your hosts, and with me is Carla Moore, your other host. And this is an extra special episode because we're actually together in the same place, recording at the Equipped workshop hosted by the Cumberland Trace Church of Christ. And we get to be here together with all of you. That's another reason why it's extra special. So this is going to be fun. It's not moving, that's right. Normally we don't have to worry about it, and we can talk for a little bit. And then we're going to get into a topic that I think will be one we can all Isaiah 40 verse 31. So, before then, though, tell me how you're doing, and we know you've been up to a lot, but go ahead and fill us in.
I've been up to a lot. This doesn't feel like it's microphoning. Is it just recording? Is that what it's for?
No. Keep going.
It's green. It's green.
Okay.
The button's
Can
green.
everybody hear okay? How can everybody hear?
It just doesn't feel like it's... Is microphoning a word?
It is now.
It is. Well, so we've been to Atlanta, Terminal B, Gate 26, I think 4 times in the last 2 weeks. But it's been a good couple of weeks. I'm supposed to talk to you, not to them. It's awkward, isn't it? Because you know all this already, but I'll tell you again. So we had been this week in Dalton, Georgia. I did a ladies' day on Saturday, and the theme was home field advantage, and I think we talked about that a little bit last week. And then John did a kind of a marriage seminar gospel meeting, and then we went to that was Saturday through Tuesday night, and then Wednesday we went to Oklahoma for the Excel Still More Bible workshop, which was a lot of fun. I enjoyed it, but it was a real quick turnaround. And then we left there yesterday afternoon and went back through Atlanta and Nashville, and we got in about 2 o'clock this morning. So if my eyes look a little bleary, that's why. But I've been looking forward to this for a long time because we don't get together very often in real life, IRL.
And I think you look great for somebody who only had a little catnap and then showed up to keep going, like the Energizer Bunny.
Oh,
and the colors that we're wearing, I think, helps a lot. Why don't you tell everybody about these shirts?
These are gifts from Carol Moores and Onisa Gibson. Are y'all in here? Yeah, there they are, back in the middle. They made shirts for us about things that we said on the podcast a couple weeks ago, I guess. Mine says, "I'm just here for the chips and salsa," which is always the truth. And then Kathy says, "Sorry, I can't. It's tornado season." Which apparently it is all the time around here, it seems like lately.
We did not know that when we moved here. I feel like we were snookered. I don't know. Apparently we're in Tornado Alley now, so I didn't know that. But yeah,
Well, you've survived so far.
Well, this is so hard. I have so much I'm going to share and talk to you about, but I'm narrowing it down to a couple of things. We've been talking about pickleball because Hillary and I have been taking lessons from a pro. And I went with my sister to Portland, and they have this community thing where it's opened up, and anybody can show up and play. So we showed up, and I want to look at y'all and you.
I know, it's weird.
And we had to tell everybody we don't know what we're doing. We've never played before, like we've never actually played a game, and they were so nice about it. Well, everybody there was at least 15 years older than me, and I fell twice. And one of those times was into the net.
Trying to smash it and.
I fell into the net and brought down the whole net. And the old people are coming over to me and helping me up and like, you need to take a little break. Do you need to also said, you need to wear safety goggles. So, but it was fun. I'm gonna keep on, and I'm gonna get better at it. And then afterwards, my sister gave me this new glasswork piece that she made. It's called a propagator, because you put your plant cuttings in that little test tube and put water in it, and it is beautiful. I hang it in my kitchen window, and I love it. Okay, so the only other thing I want to share really quickly is that my son Dale and his wife Janelle and our little grandson Jude got home from church Wednesday night, and they drove into their driveway, and there was a burglar in their house. What? Oh, that was exciting.
Tell it again.
Yeah, and so there was a vehicle in their driveway with the lights running. They thought somebody came by to see them, but nobody got out of the car. And then Dale was like, hold on a second. And they could see somebody in their house with a flashlight. And so they called the cops. And so she's texting in the family text, somebody just broke into their house, the cops are on the way, and I'm going, what? And so I'm trying to call Janelle, and she's not answering, and then she's texting back, sorry, I'm still on the phone with the dispatch. And so anyway, the guy eventually ran out of the house and took off, and the cops showed up and chased him down, and he was apprehended. And he stole things, but he bypassed a laptop and iPads and stole the most bizarre things I'm not even going to mention, and even the baby monitor.
Wow.
Yeah. So anyway, you can imagine they were a little unsettled, and Janelle didn't want to even put Jude in his crib, and didn't want to go to sleep that night, but it did, and she had to go down to the station after all of that and say, yes, this is all my stuff, you know. And so anyway.
Was he drunk or high, or do they know?
They said that they think he was on something.
Well, I know I've heard people say that it just feels like such a violation when
Yes.
someone, I mean, it is, but the way it makes you feel.
Yes.
Ugh.
Yeah.
Well, now, this is not the first time that Dale has been,
Dale is always into
there's stuff that
Adventure.
surrounds him all the time.
Yes.
What was
I
the one-
should have warned Janelle about that before she married him.
something that he chased someone down.
Yeah, there was somebody shoplifting in Ross, and he chased him down in the Ross parking lot and tackled him. And I was furious. And I was like, no, you call for help. You don't be the help. Sorry. And but the police gave him a coin, like an award. I was like, what's the matter with you? So ever since then, he has called himself the Ross Tackler.
But he's not the one that did the tackling this time, though.
Not this time, no. So
Surprised he
that's
didn't run after him.
that's my news.
Well, that's pretty, I don't want to say exciting, because that's not, you don't want burglars, but.
You know, thankfully they're okay. And because they did get the guy, it was a little more, you know, they could relax knowing that he was caught. So, but yeah.
Well, now I'm curious what he took. You're gonna have to
I will
later.
tell you later.
Okay.
I asked for Janelle's permission, and I said I will not tell what they stole. So.
Okay. I'm even more curious.
On that note, is there anything else you want to talk about?
Well, I want
Yes.
this email. We got an email this week from a friend, Kathy White, and she's been with us on a trip to Israel, I think 2019. And they're going to go again with us in the fall, not to Israel, but somewhere else. But she emailed, and we were talking about something else, and she said that her friend, Vicki Quinn, likes to listen to Looking Up, and she does too. And this is what she said. This is what her friend Vicki said. I've been listening to the girls, she'll say, and when she arrives at my place for a cuppa after work once a week. So, I've heard, let's have a cuppa. It's I had to look it up what it meant. It's British for cup of tea.
And they're in Australia.
And they're in Australia, yeah. So we thought we would give Kathy and Vicki a shout out if y'all want to say hi Kathy and Vicki, or what should we have them say?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Everybody want to say hi,
All of
Kathy?
us?
Hi, Kathy.
Thanks for listening.
Yeah, all the way from Australia. I think that's pretty cool.
That is very
And she
cool.
lives in Perth. Yeah, on the other side of the world.
Mhm.
Yeah, okay, I'm done.
Okay, I'm going to share a quote by John Ortberg, and he said, biblically, waiting is not just something we have to do until we get what we want. Waiting is a part of the process of becoming what God wants us to be. And we wanted to be able to chat about something that would tie into the theme, which is the Behold the Glory of the Lord from the book of Isaiah. That's our theme for Equipped. So we chose Isaiah 40, verse 31, but I want to go ahead and read verses 30 and 31. And it says, even youths shall faint and be weary, and young men shall fall exhausted. But they who wait for the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings like eagles. They shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and not faint. So I thought I would just very briefly, for all of us here together, give a little background that may have been mentioned in the lesson already, and then we'll just chat about it and share some things about lessons that we've learned in the waiting room. The background here is the Israelites were in Babylonian captivity, but they'd been in captivity for a long time. And so at this point, they were just starting to have all the questions. You know, has God forgotten all about us? Does he know where we are? Did he abandon us? You know, they were really getting discouraged. And so the message for them was, it's not a matter of just sitting around twiddling your thumbs and waiting on God. It is keeping your trust in God while you're waiting, even in difficult times. So there's a couple of questions that I thought we would think about, and all of you out there be thinking about while we're talking. And one of the questions is, first of all, how are you at waiting? Is that your superpower?
Depends on what I'm waiting for.
I think of all the times that we do wait, you know, in line, waiting on somebody to reply to a text, waiting on Scottsville Road traffic, you know, just in all the opportunities that we have to wait. But obviously we're thinking about more serious times of waiting that we can find ourselves in life. So how are you at waiting? And number two, does it bring out the best in you? Does it bring out the best in you? So those are the things I kind of want us to keep in mind, in the back of our mind as we're talking. The handout that everybody here today has is a Bible marking topic on Wait for the Lord. For if you want to do that, if you haven't already on your own time, it's a great study. But another thing I noticed about this verse, when it mentions eagles, the Bible actually has a lot to say about eagles too. Did you know that? There is a ton in the Bible about eagles, and it's actually an interesting study, and we don't have time to talk about it, but it'd be a fun Bible marking topic to do, especially with kids. So that'd be another good one on your own time. So what I thought we would do is I'd like to start out by asking you to share a time or two that you spent waiting. It could be in a literal waiting room or just another time of waiting, and tell us a little bit about that, and then I want to ask you a couple more questions about that experience.
Waiting rooms, you know, I was just thinking waiting rooms because we were talking about that earlier, and there was a situation, things happened to John's family. John's dad had a kidney removed. This was probably 1995, something like that, so 30 years ago. And John and I had gone in to see him after the surgery, and while we were in there, he got sick, like he was throwing up. And it burst the sutures inside that they had stitched, you know, this whatever not aorta, but whatever they had cut, it burst inside.
Good.
And he collapsed, and it was, I mean, John and I were just frozen because people started rushing in, and so it was a serious situation, and it happened to be on a Wednesday. And so we ended up in the waiting room, and people showed up and showed up and showed up and showed up. I mean, everybody from Dripping Springs, the congregation there. We had a waiting room at Seton Hospital full of people, and the ones who were back at Bible class that night were praying for him. And I was trying to remember exactly what we were praying for. There was something about platelets, because they were having to go back in, which sounds horrific to me, to go back into a surgical area, but they couldn't do it if he didn't have enough platelets or something. So we were praying, asking everyone in Bible class to pray. And by the end of Bible class, the surgeons decided that it was safe to go back in, that he wouldn't be worse off. And, just a lot of things in that experience of God answering prayers. And, sometimes we say it's working, the prayers are working, and I think that's not really exactly I don't want to say inappropriate, but because our God always hears the prayers when we pray, and we're, a righteous man, woman, and yet sometimes he answers yes, sometimes he says wait, sometimes he says no, but in that instance, he answered our prayers the way we were asking him to. But just thinking about the people in the waiting room with us and the prayers that were going on out there, and being surrounded by our Christian family and our physical family too, it's pretty interesting to see a waiting room full of Christians, and then the same waiting room where there's other families there that don't have that kind of support system. And I always want to, think about how this could be yours too. That sounds a little bit like a game show, but if you had a Christian family, you would have this support as well. So that's just one of the times in a waiting room that I think about.
I'll never forget the very first time that we were on the side in the hospital, and that's when Gary our oldest, was young, and he had RSV, and so he couldn't breathe, and we took him to the doctor, and he ended up going to the hospital, and they had the whole nebulizer thing, and I had never been around asthma or anything like that, and to me it was the hugest deal, and I was this young mom, and I was crying like a baby, and it wasn't even that big of a deal. It just was to me. But when I walked out in the waiting room, there were all these people from church, and I had no idea that they were even there. And I will never forget how I felt, because I grew up in a preacher's family, and we went to see people, and I married a preacher, and we went to see people. But this was us, that, everybody took time out of their day to come down there and be with us and support us. And I was just remember walking out there, and it was like, just so thoughtful. I know that's not the only time. I'm sure we could share lots of stories, and everybody here really could share a story about being in the waiting room. But I want to ask you, what was the hardest part about it?
Well, the fear, the fear of what is God's answer? What is God's will in this situation? And not knowing, you want to maybe run ahead of God, and you want to fix things yourself. But one of the things that, I don't know if you're going to ask what we learned, but
That's okay. Speak freely.
Well, just when I was looking at this passage and the part, a couple of verses up that says he does not faint or grow weary. And I was thinking about all the things that we can learn from God in this passage, that, he's everlasting. He never grows weary. He's always awake. Some of those things when your loved one is in the hospital. And when John was in the hospital, I couldn't stay there the whole time. It was during the heavy part of COVID. And so I was able to go from 11 a.m. to 8 p.m., but then thinking about him being by himself in that ICU room all night long.
Who's going to keep watch?
Yeah, but it was very comforting to me to know that God was awake, and that he was there with him, and nothing catches him by surprise. He won't faint. He doesn't faint. And, think about fainting and how it catches us off guard. I've never fainted, have you?
I don't think so.
But
Neil says I have.
I've seen people faint, and it's like it comes out of nowhere sometimes.
Yeah.
And that doesn't happen to God. He knows what's coming, and he's not surprised by anything. So when those kind of things happen, I just think, God, if we can put our trust in him and not be, of course we're going to be afraid. That fear is always going to be there, but it's not the same kind of fear. It's just maybe the fear of the unknown, but the peace that we have when we know that God is taking care of things, and whatever the outcome is his will.
Okay, so with the what did you learn?
That I just answered.
Sort of. That's okay.
What did you learn from your waiting room experiences?
Well, we could do that. I'll share a couple of things, and then I'll skip to the question about the other one that I told you about. We are very professional.
I already know that.
There's other types of waiting rooms too, not just times when we go to the hospital. So I thought we would talk about some other waiting types of experiences, and then maybe what we can learn from each one of them. I guess I should look at that. And one of them was, have you ever had a period of expectation and it just feels like you're waiting and you thought the answer would come sooner, or you'd learned something before now, and when's this going to be realized? When's this promise going to happen? And this expectation period, it can be trying sometimes. And I'm going to share a trivial example. This is, a trivial example. But I submitted a novel to a contest, and I knew I was going to win.
Why not?
Right? And Neil thought it was amazing. My sister read it, and she thought it was amazing. And they're not biased at all. But, I was really excited. I felt really good about it. The judge was supposed to contact the finalists, early on, and they'd send their work back so you'd have time to work on it before the final, and I never got anything. And the deadline for the end of the contest was getting closer and closer, and still nobody had reached out to me. And finally, when it was over, I got the pat email, I'm sorry your score wasn't high enough to even place in this contest, but please don't be discouraged and keep writing and blah, 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 blah. And, I was discouraged and I may have shed a tear or two, but I thought about the fact that sometimes we're not at the place that we think we are. And this is a very trivial example, but, even in our own spiritual lives, when we think we're ready for something, or we know something, or we're strong in an area, and then something happens and we learn, I had some growing to do. And I did. The judge's remarks were brutal. Somewhat snarky also, but that's another conversation. But I wasn't where I thought I was, and I had a lot to learn, and a lot that I didn't know, that I didn't know, that I didn't know. And I think in life too, that God works that way in these situations. Sometimes we may think we're somewhere, and we're just not. And we have things to learn from the circumstances or the people around us that have been there and do know what they're doing in life. And it teaches humility and patience and, all kinds of things. And so there are situations like that. Another one I thought of was with this expectation thing. Sometimes we think we have life all planned out. It's going to happen this way and everything's going to fall in line this way because we've thought about it, and it doesn't work out that way. Relationships, career paths, maybe the timing's not right, maybe we have a lot to learn, or whatever it might be. So if this waiting thing, is it going to bring out the best in you? Well, when your life is on hold, I think often that's what God is trying to do. He's trying to bring out the best in you in these times of waiting. And then another one I thought of was disappointment. And if you have a loved one that isn't acting the way they're supposed to.
A loved one that's not acting like they're supposed to. I think about family members who are suffering as a result of their waiting. Infertility is one of those that comes to mind, and how Alyssa, one of my daughters-in-law, has said when they were going through this, one of the things that strikes me that she used to say, I'm going to keep asking God for a yes, and if he says no, then I will say yes to the no.
Oh, that's so good.
It is, and the more you think about it, the more sense it makes, and because
That's really good.
a different timeline than what ours is, but being willing to accept God's answer, or just know that it's not right now, but be able to say, okay, God, it's not your will, it's not your timing, and I'm satisfied, and I'll wait until you say yes, or I'll be satisfied with a no.
Mm-hmm. Alyssa is so wise. That's not the first time you've shared something smart from her.
She's fine.
Yeah, she's very smart. So if a loved one disappoints you, someone falls away, it kind of feels like you're in the waiting room because you're helpless. You can encourage them and pray about it, but you can't make them do the right thing. So you pray to the great physician, who's the only one who can. But you're learning, you're holding vigil, you're waiting for them. Another one is fear. you learn a lot about fear in the waiting room. Think about those times when you have to go in for tests. I've talked about my sister and her battle with cancer, and it seems like it's not just getting the test that's the hard part, it's the waiting. And oh, we'll have something for you in a couple of weeks.
A couple weeks is a really long time when you're waiting for something.
Yeah, what are you going to learn? And we have a dear member here that is having some tests done to find out if the cancer is gone or if it's still here, and that's hard. And so waiting for results, what's the diagnosis? Another fearful waiting situation I thought about was the consequences of sin. And the reckoning, and if maybe there's been exposure, and what's going to happen now? Who all is going to find out? How is this going to change my life? What's the fallout? Is my marriage salvageable? There's all these situations where we're waiting for the axe to drop or consequences or whatever it might be. And we might feel that kind of, that anxiety that brings that queasiness, that nail-biting apprehension. God can use that to teach us something while we're waiting through all of that. And hopefully that apprehension and anxiety is a big enough lesson to keep us from making those same bad choices or getting caught up in that again. So can you think of another waiting scenario that...
Well, I hadn't even really thought about what you're talking about with waiting for the consequence of your sin, but thinking of how brokenness is a good thing, which we've talked about that. We've had an episode on that, but allowing it to have a positive effect on you. Maybe you're afraid of what the consequence is going to be. Like you said, it's a good motivator to not do it again. But once you get on the other side of it, like a lot of times when you wait for something, you get on the other side of it and realize that it was a good thing for me to have to wait and to have to be patient. I don't think we've even used that word yet, but patience and that waiting. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so then let's go back to the questions. How would you encourage someone else going through it? Someone spending time in the waiting room, maybe in one of these various forms?
Well, maybe what we were just talking about with those of us who have been there and gone through those waiting periods or the waiting room have been afraid, and we've been in those situations and come out on the other side and see all of the blessings and the faith and that increases because of that waiting period, and seeing how God shows up, to put it that way, and just to know that there's something good on the other side of the waiting almost all the time. You can find something good. Sometimes it's hard to find it, but if you're looking for it, you can find something good that will come from waiting, being patient. How would you answer that question?
I think that probably the thing I struggle with the most is feeling like I'm too proud to accept help or, to admit that, how are you doing? Fine. What can we do for you? Nothing, we're good. And like I mentioned, walking out into the, all those years ago and seeing all those people around me, how I immediately felt so much comfort just knowing that I wasn't there alone. And I think that's such a great reminder in both ways. And we kind of keep going back to this idea in a lot of these topics that we talk about. God gave us the Christian family for a reason. And the waiting room is a lot less lonely when people are in there with you. And think about, our dear friend Lynn Height. Her mom was sick for a long time, and they spent a long time in the hospital. And when people would say, let us come spell you, go home and shower, go home and get some fresh clothes on and walk your dog and do, let us stay here with your mom for a little while. And she didn't want to be away from her mom, but she needed that break to be able to come back and be with her again. And so remembering that all these gestures that you think you do that don't mean very much, I only stopped by for 10 minutes. I was only there for a minute. We just ran in and prayed with them. But it means a lot. And it might have been just that little extra boost that they needed, and especially if they've been going through something for a long time, And then, of course, flipping it around, accepting it, inviting people into that waiting room with you, no matter what it looks like, even if it's not a hospital waiting room. You're, waiting for surgery. You're waiting for that job opportunity to open up. You're waiting for your marriage to be resolved, whatever it might be.
Well, there might be another benefit of that waiting is once you've been through it and you've experienced it like y'all did when Gary was in the hospital, you know what other people need when they're going through it. So it makes you more aware of needs for other people because you've been there.
Yeah, that's true. And the only other thing I could think of as far as encouraging others is that the time when you're waiting drags on. It just goes slower, and it feels like it does. And once you've experienced something like that and you're on the other side of it, when you look back, all of a sudden it's back to normal time, you know, and you kind of want to encourage someone, I know this feels like it's dragging on forever, but there will be an other side to this, you know, and I think about what Paul said about nothing here that we experience can compare to the glory that's to come. You know, even though it seems like it's going on forever and ever, it will just seem like a blip. Just hold on, don't let go, stay faithful, let God's people in, keep God in, and no matter how it gets resolved here, the glory that is to come can't compare. So I would encourage him in that way too. Yeah.
Just thinking, I thought I asked you for no rain.
I tried. I told you our good weather was out of stock.
I need you to find somewhere and put it back in stock. Just thinking about, we have a friend who, we have two, this is something that happened several years ago, but a young single woman and a young single man, and we just knew that they were perfect for each other. Actually, there's two different situations that I can think of, and we kept, you know, encouraging them. Y'all need to get to know one another. Y'all need to get together, you know. And we would say something to her and something to him, and it wasn't happening. It was frustrating to me because I was waiting on them to get together. And I knew that she was waiting and he was waiting. Well, why don't they stop waiting and get together? And it didn't happen when I wanted it to. But about 5 years later, it did. You know, that was when it needed to, in both of these situations. And I know it doesn't always happen that way. But think about God's timing, and it was really selfish of me to want them to hurry up and get married because I thought they were perfect for each other. But they did, but it had to be on God's time and when they were ready and when they could see it and feel it and fall in love, you know, there was that little thing there. So
I feel like that Matchmaker song is going to be stuck in my head.
I'll share it with everybody.
What is that even from?
The Fiddler on the Roof.
Yeah. Now that song's going to be stuck in my head also. Okay. Well, I also thought about the fact that not all waiting is negative, because sometimes we're in the waiting room for amazing things. And sometimes you're in the waiting room for the upcoming birth of a grandchild. And when our first grandson was being born, you know, the moms, they do the overnight bags and stuff, like they're all prepared and ready to go at a moment's notice for when they go into labor, and they can just grab that bag and go out the door. I did the same thing. And I had a bag, and I thought, for me. Games and magazines and my laptop and my little notebook and just snacks.
All the necessary things.
I didn't know how long we were going to be there, and you know, we were just going to be, we weren't in the room, her mother was in the room with her, but we were in the waiting room downstairs. And we were there for several hours, and it went by so fast. And it was a great time. We had a little, for me. Yes, and we had a little spiral notebook that I bought just for the games that we would play in there, so I could put, you know, games we were playing while we were waiting for the birth of our grandson, Rich. So not all times spent waiting are negative. Sometimes they're joyful occasions, and we have that expectation of good things to come, and we're just waiting for it to happen. You were waiting for that couple to get together because you're the matchmaker, and you saw it coming. But I kept thinking about how all of life is a waiting room for the best thing to come. Yeah. And, you know, just like I was trying to prepare of how I was going to spend my time, you know, and anticipating the arrival of the baby. And isn't that what we're doing? We're preparing and thinking about how we're going to spend our time while we're waiting for the best thing to come, that anticipation of heaven and the most beautiful thing that we're waiting for. So, yeah, even though we have the trials and the times of waiting, like God is, through Isaiah, reminding his people, just, they kind of got themselves in that situation.
Yeah.
But he still had promises for them. And so much that he wanted to do for them. And the promises that he gave them, but they were impatient about it and just needed to be reminded, stay strong. I haven't forgotten you. I know exactly where you are. I'm still with you. Keep trusting in me. Keep being my children. And so in this grand waiting room of life, through all of that, the best is yet to come. And we just keep trusting in God. And I think it's interesting that, we're no spring chickens. Speak for yourself. I'm no spring chicken. And when you've been a Christian for several years and you think you have, attained a level of spiritual maturity, no matter what comes in my life, I'm going to hang on and I'm never going to let go. And I thank God that that's true, but that doesn't mean I never questioned. And you think that your faith is strong, and of course I trust in God. Of course I know he's always going to be there, but sometimes when you're waiting or things happen, you're like, why is this happening? Why are tornadoes even a thing? And you find yourself asking questions that even while you're asking them, it's almost like, why am I even asking this question? But sometimes you find yourself, you do wonder, what's the point? Why are we going through this? God, why are you letting this happen? And so I'm grateful for the waiting room times, because I know we need the refinement. We need the reminders. We need to remember that we do not depend on ourselves or lean on ourselves. We can only trust God and lean on him through all of this.
It's interesting that you brought that up, because I was looking through my notes in my Bible on Isaiah 40, and I had a little note here that says, how great thou art to me. And it was Dan Winkler that said that in a lesson, I don't know how many years ago. But that's what this whole chapter is about. When you look at it very personally, how great he is to each one of us. We might, and we will have to wait through some things. All of us have. Everyone in this room, everyone listening has had the periods of waiting, and maybe we responded to them in a really good way. Maybe we did it in a really stinky way, but I think we learn from those times that we don't respond well. I hope we do. I think I have. But how great he is to us is what this is about.
And I mentioned the support that we get from others that makes the waiting room time less lonely and so much easier. But what you said just made me think that sometimes we need the admonishment from others in the waiting room, and we're learning about ourselves and our own character, and sometimes we need the loved ones that do see our soul and care about our soul and are willing to say something to us. And I think about, hopefully my own husband, when he sees me acting less than stellar, and he cares enough to say something to me, again, challenging my pride. How am I going to handle this? And I know he's right, but in the moment, I don't want to acknowledge it. It's an opportunity for growth. And in our spiritual family, sometimes we see the people around us waiting, and we know what they're going through. But we also know that there are things going on that nobody knows about. The hidden cares, the things happening behind closed doors. There's all kinds of waiting out there that we don't all know about. And so we have to give each other the benefit of the doubt. We have to extend grace in those moments. And then when we do see things, something's not right. Something's off. I'm seeing a change here. I'm seeing something concerning going on. Then we have to care enough in humility to make sure they're okay. Check in with them and make sure they're okay and say what needs to be said. But on the other side of that, have the humility to receive it in love. And know that it took a lot of courage to say something. So just the waiting room, when you look at other people in there, do you people watch in the waiting room?
Oh, yeah.
And you can tell the ones that are there for scary situations and the ones that are there for happy situations. And you can see it in how they interact with each other, and how they treat each other. You know, waiting room situations can bring out the worst in us when it comes to stress and fear. You ever been so scared for somebody that you love that you're mad at them? You know,
Oh, yeah.
and so sometimes our voice changes, and when we're fearful, we sound mad.
Comes out as anger.
Yeah, we sound mean, and you see that stress in the waiting room, and you can kind of tell what's going on a lot of times in that family. And again, you know, with the big analogy of all of life being the waiting room, and people in the world are looking at us, and how are we handling all the situations?
Yeah.
You know, and with our stress or our fear or anxiety or whatever it is, how are we handling it? How are we talking to each other?
It's funny, as so often we do, we have different ways of thinking about the topics, and we don't always discuss them. We did a little bit beforehand, but I was thinking of literal waiting rooms, what waiting rooms need, and of course, I think food was at the very top of the list. You know, because sometimes you don't want to leave to eat, you know, you don't want to leave if there's something serious going on, but you still do need nourishment. And then, of course, prayer in the waiting room, because it benefits everyone that's in there, not just you who are worried about your loved one, but those other people who are there see the prayer. It draws their mind to God, and we can pray for them. We can ask to pray for them. And I thought about reading material, tracts. You know, that seems to be kind of a, if you want to use the word, old-fashioned thing to do, tracts. But you leave those because people sitting there doing nothing will pick up something and read it. But the main thing
That's a good idea.
that we need in the waiting room that I wrote down is wisdom. Because, you know, silly things like being boisterous and loud and laughing and just being kind and thinking about the people, other people who are in there who are suffering, or they're mourning or grieving or praying, and, you know, we're not paying attention to our own, what we're doing, how we're acting. But just thinking of wisdom in, like you've been talking about, how we need wisdom in the waiting room of life, and how we respond to our own periods of waiting, and how we try to help others who are in periods of waiting.
Yeah, and usually at the end of an episode, you know, we say, we'd love to hear your thoughts on this, and every time we say that, we really mean it. But we have a room full of women here today, and I would love to hear your thoughts on this, and because I know everybody has a story, and everybody's learned. There's always tons of books written about, you know, trials and grief and storms and things, because that's where we learn the most. And so there's, collectively in this room, is a ton of wisdom, you know, just from experience and leaning on God and trusting in God, and it would be great to learn from everybody. So if any of you want to, go to Looking Up with Kathy and Carla on Facebook and share some of your thoughts and experiences and wisdom with everybody else that's in that group that's not here today. That would be fantastic, and we can make this something encouraging for even more people. Okay, so did you know that God waits for us too?
Does he?
He does. In the same book, in Isaiah 30, verse 18, I want to end with this verse. Therefore, the Lord waits to be gracious to you. Now, some versions read, the Lord longs to be gracious to you. Some say the Lord is waiting to be gracious to you. Therefore, the Lord waits to be gracious to you, and therefore he exalts himself to show mercy to you. For the Lord is a God of justice, and blessed are all those who wait for him. So I love how it's both ways. You know, he's waiting to bless us, and we are blessed when we wait on him. So I thought that would be the perfect conclusion for today's topic. And normally, whoever's driving, and I'm driving this week, will say until next time, and the other person will say what they're supposed to say. But this time we want all of you to say it with us. So until next time, keep looking up. Thank you so much for being here.